Things are as messy as ever for the Raiders right now as their star wide receiver Davante Adams is disgruntled and he's not going to end up in LA, but that might be a blessing in disguise.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen, and to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, superstar wide receiver Davante Adams is not happy, and he wants out of Las Vegas. He wants to find a new team. That new team is probably not going to be the Chargers. But the Chargers have other big problems they need to deal with, like the interior of their offensive line. It has not been good, and Athir wants to blow it all up and start completely over. And is it finally time to switch out Gus Edwards for Kimani Vidal?
That is an interesting one because Gus Edwards has not been great so far. But today is Crossover Thursday, and unfortunately we don't have a crossover, but it's still presented by PrizePicks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5 and play the best daily fantasy sports app out there. But David, it is our Chargers mailbag today, and we have a great question here. I think one that many Chargers fans have probably kind of hoped under their breath a little bit would happen potentially, and that is, what are the chances of Davante Adams becoming a Charger? This is from Chancellor on Twitter. David, I've seen this sentiment out there a lot. I don't think it's happening. I think the chances are pretty small.
Yeah, to me, I think they're less than 1%. There's just a lot of factors involved. Number one, this is a superstar wide receiver from another team in your division. So very, very, very rarely do they ever consummate deals of this magnitude inside the division. It just doesn't happen. You just don't want to give one of your best players to another team you're going to have to face again this year and multiple times over the next couple of seasons. So that, number one. Number two, Davante Adams is making a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And also, he is 32 years old. His cap hit for 2024, Daniel, is $16.8 million, just talking about base salary here.
Because that's what you would take on if you traded for him. Exactly.
Yeah, you don't take care of any of the bonuses. That sticks with the original team. But even then, that's a lot of money, and the Chargers don't have it. When you look at their cap space, according to Over the Cap, they're sitting at about $7.8 million worth of cap space. So they would have to do a ton of cap gymnastics to even accommodate that deal if they were even able to consummate one.
And the thing is like teams can convert a certain amount to their salary cap. And if someone really wants to move someone like they do in this situation, because how untenable it is right now in Las Vegas, they could make it work. But at the same time, it's just not going to happen for more reasons than that. First of all, I mean, he's already put out his top choices out there. And a surprise to no one, it's the Jets and the Saints, his two former quarterbacks. And it didn't even seem like he was a fan of Derek Carr when him and Derek Carr were playing on the Raiders together.
It didn't seem like it.
Not really. And then Derek Carr was gone. So you would know coming in that he wouldn't want to come to your team, right? That you weren't one of his top options.
Oh, yeah.
The part you didn't say also, too, the Chargers aren't going to pay $36 million and take a $36 million cap hit in 2025 and 2026, which is what it would be if they traded for him. His cap hit right now is $44 million, but if you traded for him, he would still hit for $36 million in both of those seasons. It's just not going to happen. That's not the way they're building this team, even though he undoubtedly makes you better, even though he would solve your problem at wide receiver one.
Sure.
You would be a much better offense with a guy like Davante Adams. Would it fix everything? No, there's other issues on this offense, and it would still be kind of hit or miss and a little bit inconsistent, I think. At the same time, it's hard to just say, hey, don't go get Davante Adams. And I'm not really saying that because in a vacuum, it works. But for this team and what the cap situation is and kind of, I think, what the timeline is, I just don't really think it makes a ton of sense because I think he's a guy that would come in an offense that's not a pass-first offense. And what he's already kind of shown you to this point in his career, David, is he's a guy that cares about how many targets he gets. And It just seems like that could lead down a road where you have your own disgruntled superstar, and he's bringing his mess from Las Vegas to LA. And after already kind of having some beef with the Chargers social media about calling him a trash Pop-Tart, I just don't think it's going to happen. And I also just don't think the Chargers right now at 2-2 in the first season of Jim Harbaugh are in the all-in mentality to trade away very valuable assets to make a run this year.
Especially for, a player that is not going to come in and, change the way that you do things or really fit in with the way you do things roster construction wise. They got rid of their two really expensive wide receivers in the off season and replaced them with several much cheaper, low risk, high reward type of options, like a DJ Chark, who we're going to talk about. But the Chargers are not going to be building their roster around spending $30-40 million on wide receivers anymore. That's just not how they're going to put things together under Jim Harbaugh. They're going to be wanting to pay their offensive linemen, their defensive linemen, their edge rushers, their core, corners. Like, the money is going to go elsewhere. It's not going to be in the wide receiver room. And that's just evidenced by how Jim Harbaugh has constructed his rosters as a head coach.
I just also don't think you're going to pay that much for someone that you don't know if it's a fit. And there's probably a high likelihood that it's not a fit, right? And I just think that it's just not a move that makes a ton of sense for the Chargers right now. That being said, they have a lack of weapons. They need more firepower on offense. And it doesn't mean they can't make a move. I just don't think Davante Adams is the move to make. But that brings us to the next question here from Boomer on Twitter, who says, do you think that DJ Chark coming back will move the needle? So just some background information. DJ Chark at the beginning of the season was put on injured reserve, meaning he had to miss at least the first 4 weeks. At least the first 4 weeks, right? Not exactly 4 weeks, at least the first 4 weeks. Now, he gets the bye week in week 5, which helps him, right? Another week that he can miss that isn't a game. There's a chance that he comes back in week 6. What we know so far, Daniel Popper reporting from practice on Wednesday, that DJ Chark was working off to the side, was not a full participant in practice, and that his activation window, the 21-day window in which the Chargers can bring him back onto the roster, has not been started yet. So I think we should temper our expectations about thinking, okay, hey, he's for sure coming back in week 6. And I also think just because of the way this offense has gone so far, to kind of temper some expectations of just the numbers he's going to put up when he does come back.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think when you look at DJ Chark, and at least especially the last couple of years, it's not really been a ton of volume, a ton of targets. The one thing that he has excelled at is getting, the most out of those targets. I mean, the last 2 years, it's been 16.7 yards per reception and 15 yards per reception. So he has been a bit of a big play guy, a guy that's, been targeted down the football field, and he has a respectable 44.1% contested catch percentage, which is pretty solid. He is able to go up and high point the ball, go up and make plays in that respect. But the Chargers need to fix their pass protection situation before they can think about targeting wide receivers down the football field. I think that's going to be a huge part of it. And also, like you said, who knows when DJ Chark is going to be back and healthy. I think once they start that window, then you can start, anticipating maybe he'll make his return. But if they're not comfortable enough to start that window yet, that means that he's probably not that close.
I think the other big thing about someone that plays his position and has his specific skill set is he needs to be fully back to make an impact. Like, he's not a player that you want out on the field at 80%. It's just not. There's certain guys, even like a Mike Williams, right, where it's like he might be 75% out there, but like you need a jump ball in a certain situation, he's still going to be your best option to go to. Yeah. DJ Chark banged up is not a good option for this team right now. And just overall, I don't think he necessarily moves the needle in that way. At the same time, he is a legitimate deep threat. Most of the contested catches he's making are not jump ball, go get it. It's more just like he doesn't create a ton of separation. So on a lot of these deep balls, he's had to come down with some contested catches, but that's awesome. To have a receiver that can get down the field, a 4-3 guy, and be able to make those tight catches down the field is something the Chargers don't have. Quentin Johnston's been their deep threat type of guy this season. That's not really what his game is. But the Chargers' longest pass this year was the 37-yarder catch and run to Ladd McConkey last week, and DJ Chark can get that in one target, right? That is what he brings to the table. I do think he brings a different element. He was the starter going into the season before he got hurt, but now Quentin Johnston's taken a step. Ladd McConkey has been awesome so far, so it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. I do think he brings a different element to this offense, but I wouldn't say because DJ Chark comes back, you wouldn't need to go make a trade, or that's going to fix a lot of the issues that you have. But we still have much more to get into, including Athir wanting to throw away the entirety of the Chargers' interior offensive line and start from scratch. We're getting to that and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about Game Time, though, because if you need tickets to any sort of event, not even just sports, whatever it is, theater, music, comedy, anything you're trying to do, any memories you're trying to make, you have to know about Game Time, because Game Time is awesome and now has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. I'm a success story of Game Time. I thank Game Time for giving me the experience I had on Tuesday night going to the Padres game and their big 4-0 win over the Atlanta Braves. It was so electric, and me and David have always talked about it. It's more about the memories and the moments that you gain from something like Game Time. And if you're going to make some memories and you're looking to have that moment, you might as well get it for the best price. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, David. Well, you know, when Athir calls into the show, we kind of get Athir on, and Athir is known for his optimism, and it said some truly wild things on this program, and we love him for it. What he says today, though, is kind of hard to not think about a little bit, and a scenario that we might see play out in 2025 about the interior of this offensive line, which has been completely underwhelming so far in 2024.
Dan, David, this is Athir. David, I got to say this. After 4 weeks into the season, the GM and the coach, they have not liked what they've seen from the offensive line. I believe next offseason, Alt and Slater are the only one on that team. I believe they're going to blow up everything, include Zion Johnson, go to the bench and be a backup or get traded. Do you think I'm crazy for saying this? Thank you. Love you.
David, is Athir crazy for saying it?
No, I don't think that Athir is crazy for saying it. When you look at, in particular, the pass protection metrics for the interior of the offensive line, it's just not very good. It's just really not. Zion Johnson has a 38.8 pass block grade. Bradley Bozeman has a 46.1 pass block grade.
That's
and
up.
Trey Pipkins has a 39.5 pass block grade. Zion Johnson has given up 5 hits and 3 hurries, and Bradley Bozeman's given up a sack, and Trey Pipkins has given up 2 sacks, although both of those I think were when he was playing right tackle.
Yeah.
Either way, the interior of the offensive line has not been great when it comes to pass protection. They've really struggled dealing with twists and stunts and picking that up. It has been a major, major problem for, you know, the Chargers and for Justin Herbert, who is, you know, dealing with that ankle injury and having that limited mobility. And when you have pressure that's been, you know, coming straight at your face and you can't move around very well, that's a recipe for disaster. And so the interior of this offensive line has to get much better. They have been pretty solid run blockers. I'll have to give credit where that's due. Zion has a 76.2 run block grade, and Trey Pipkins has a 70.4 run block grade. So they have both been pretty decent and the run blocking aspect, but the pass blocking has been so bad that the run blocking is not good enough to overcome those deficiencies.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we talk about with Asante Samu Jr., where it's like you're not having the great plays to offset the bad plays. And I think that really kind of represents itself with this interior offensive line as well. I don't think it's crazy. And I mean, let's just play it out on paper, because right now, 2 of the guys that you bring up here, Bradley Bozeman and Trey Pipkins, are in the last year of their contracts. I mean, Bradley Bozeman, it was only a 1-year contract. Trey Pipkins is getting done with his 3-year contract, getting paid like he was a tackle, even though he's not really getting paid like he's a tackle. There's plenty of guards who are making more
money.
Yeah. I mean, guards are making $20+ million now.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's crazy at all. I mean, we talked, I think, you know what, the last show we did, buy or sell, hey, this will be the same interior offensive line at the end of the season. I think both of us sold that, right? Yep. So I think that there is a chance that you see changes this season. I don't even know if it's going to take till next season, but you have to hope under this new regime, that you don't have kind of the Jerry Tillery effect where they roll Zion Johnson out there in year 4, just hoping that it's going to get better. I thought it was a risk this year that they didn't bring in legitimate competition for Zion Johnson. And we all just thought that the offensive line fairy, Greg Roman, was going to come in here and sprinkle some fairy dust and he was going to turn into a different player. I bought it too. I drank a little bit of that Kool-Aid as well. At the same time, we always had our kind of reservations for it, at least how much he can improve. And he still has great moments, but it's just not enough. I mean, he is one of the bottom 3rd interior offensive lineman in the NFL right now as a first round.
Yeah, I had to go to the second page on PFF to find it.
It's never good when you have to go to the second page. I mean, it's just, that's where it starts. Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, those are cornerstone building pieces.
Yeah, they're phenomenal. They're great.
I don't think that Zion Johnson's I'd be shocked if Zion Johnson's 5th-year option was picked up. This is year 3 for him.
I don't know how you can.
No, it's going to be a silly number because of the amount of snaps he's played, especially because he's started since he was a rookie. It's just not going to be feasible for them to do it. So he has one more year in his contract after this one. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if at this trajectory, right? This is the other thing. We're talking about it 4 games in.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Things can change.
Things can change, and you have to hope that they will. And at least as someone like him, it could totally change. The light switch could flip. It's just at where we are at right now in year 3. It's just getting harder and harder to see that light switch. The room's getting darker and darker, and it's getting harder and harder to see. But it brings us perfectly to this next point here from Alex Murray. This question: do you think we should go ahead and draft a center and a guard in the first 2 rounds of the draft next year? I think 10,000% we do. Hashtag thanks coupon Tom. This is tough from a positional value standpoint. And I think the Chargers, if you learn anything from Zion Johnson, it's like if you're going to take an interior offensive lineman in the first round, you better make sure you hit, because there is not a position that's glamorized in the first round. I think this year we saw a ton of guys that are going to be guards potentially in the first round, but that's not the norm. No. We had Jackson Myers-Johnson, Zach Frazier. 2 guys are both going to be great centers that went in the second round. So I don't think it's necessarily that simple. And I think there are other big needs that where I don't think it's as much of a guarantee as it seems here.
Well, also, have we not learned? Tom Telesco drafted for need year after year after year after year because he pigeonholed himself to have to do those things. And yeah, did he get lucky getting a couple of guys in some spots they probably were not expected to be at? Yeah. Absolutely that he did. But you don't want to have to draft that way. You don't want to have to go in saying, oh, I have to get this player at this spot or else I'm doomed. You can't do that. It just from a roster building standpoint, there's a lot of other positions that still need attention. I think for me, 2 that come to mind, corner. Corner is about to be a position that you are going to need to address, because it's either Christian Fulton is going to play his way into a gigantic contract, which right now it's looking that way because he's been straight up phenomenal through 4 games for the Chargers. But Asante Samuel Jr. is in the last year of his contract. And so that's another body, a guy that's played a lot of snaps for the Chargers that they're going to have to replace. And so that's definitely a position I'm looking for them to address, because corners are really expensive and you can get them on cost-controlled contracts when you draft them early. And then defensive line. I think I've liked what I've seen from the defensive line so far, but they could still use an injection of youth and skill, I think, in that group. I think they've played admirably, but I think that's another position group that needs to be addressed in the draft. So you just can't go in immediately drafting offensive line because it's your biggest need.
Yeah, especially 2 interior guys with your first 2 round picks. I don't think you can have them like that. I think you have to hope that you have a guy now that can find value at some of those positions in later rounds. And Joe Ortiz, I wish he would have taken a center this year. I truly do.
So do I.
Just not the way it played out. I mean, I think, for Christian Fulton and Asante Samuel Jr., there is a good chance both those guys are gone, because I don't think that Asante is really a good fit for what they want to do here, and they're making it work with him. And I think Christian Fulton, it will be interesting because it's 1 year of production, right? There's not a huge sample size unless you go back to 2021 as far as another good season from him. He's playing out of his mind right now. Yeah. He's the more likely one to get re-signed if they try to. But if he kind of gets too expensive and then you don't want Asante Samuel Jr. back, who are you starting on the outside in 2025? Dean Leonard and Cam Hart? You haven't seen either of those guys play defensively for you this year, right? There's no good options as far as proven product at that point. You could keep trying to find discount deals like a Christian Fulton and keep doubling down on your ability to get more out of people. But Christian Fulton looks like an outlier to a certain extent, right? Because not every guy that they've brought in has been able to bounce back like that, which is why I also would throw tight end in the mix as far as something that could be targeted in the first or second round next year. You have Hayden Hurst, who's been pretty disappointing as a receiving option so far. I think that Will Dissly is doing what you expect him to do in the passing game. I don't think you're expecting him to do much more than that. But the tight end position isn't a dangerous weapon for this offense right now. A little better last week with some of the screen game when they were able to complete the passes, but
agreed.
When there's a Colston leveling out there, I don't think you can rule out tight end in the first 2 rounds at all, especially if they can get someone that fits what they want to do here, right? Get a young guy that fits what they want to do here and can give you a boost offensively. Because having a good receiving option at tight end, if they were to have a guy like a George Kittle, right? Obviously, there's only one George Kittle, but like if you were to get a well-rounded guy for this offense, the way they like to run things, that would be that moves the needle in a big way for a Greg Roman offense. I mean, think about some of the guys they've had, whether it's Vernon Davis or Delaney Walker or you name it, Mark Andrews as well. So I think that's another position too, but it's just not as simple as interior offensive line, because that's what it feels like it's the biggest need going into the offseason. But we still have more to get into, including if the Gus Edwards experiment is over and it's time for Kimani Vidal time, and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And unfortunately, there's no Chargers game this weekend, but there is still plenty of football, including tonight's Thursday night action. One of the great things on FanDuel is they have the most popular parlays up that you can go on, and I found one that I definitely like. You go with Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield both to go for more or over 225 passing yards, and for Bijan Robinson and Mike Evans to score an anytime touchdown. That doesn't seem that crazy. You can now get that at plus 800. That's 8-1 odds right there. And you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. David, we have more of this Chargers mailbag to get into, and I want to thank everyone, all the everydayers, for making us your first listen, as always. And if you need a second listen and you need more football action, make sure to check out the new lineup at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a game now. You can start in the morning with Tyler the Madman Rowland, who is going to be your morning shot of espresso, or you can hang back a little bit for some down-to-earth NFL talk with the barber, Tony Wiggins, and the rest of the Locked On local experts who cover their teams every day. So check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. David, let's get to this next one here. We have another common sentiment, I think, for Chargers fans on Chargers Twitter or wherever, is about Gus Edwards and the struggles of him. I was definitely bullish on what Gus Edwards can do. I definitely thought he had gas in the tank, but I think that's muddied a little bit by maybe, the offseason surgery or whatever he's dealing with. But this is from Jason Dill, who asks, should we end the Gus Edwards experiment and hand the keys over to Kimani Vidal? David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Gus Edwards is definitely a guy I was hoping that we would see some better production from, because he was pretty good last year. He was a vulture.
Very good
on those, short yardage situations. Was great in the red zone. Was really an asset from that perspective. But through 4 games, it's been a pretty underwhelming campaign so far. 38 carries, 113 yards, only 3 yards a carry, no touchdowns, only 1 forced missed tackle, 2.21 yards after contact per attempt, and only 1 run of 10+ yards. So for Gus Edwards, and it just seems like he's getting hit, right at the line of scrimmage a lot. And that part of that's the offensive line.
Definitely.
But also I feel like maybe the vision hasn't quite been there. And for Kimani Vidal, like he's like a bowling ball. I mean, he's a guy that's, really, really good at running in between the tackles and, falling forward, getting those, quality yards. And I don't see at this point what it would hurt, activating him and giving him a couple of carries and see if he can get rolling, because this offense is predicated on success in the running game, and they just have not been able to do that the last couple of weeks. Yeah. It's been really, really bad. Less than 65 yards rushing in both of those games after having great outputs the first 2 games. They just can't continue on like that. This offense really needs them to be able to run the ball be able to set them up in better, favorable down and distance situations. So you need more production out of your running backs, and you got somebody you drafted that you believe in, that you like their skill set. Well, it might be time to go see it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a roster thing too, because they would probably have to make Gus Edwards inactive if they wanted to run things the way that they're running things right now, which is they have 3 running backs on the active game day roster, one of them not being Kimani Vidal, who's been a healthy scratch, and they have Hassan Haskins, who's a special teams guy, filling in on special teams. So it seems like right now, for the 3rd running back on this team, they care much more about the special teams aspect of it than they do actually getting carries, because they know their 2 guys are J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. And to be fair, J.K. Dobbins, after being the best back in the league for the first 2 weeks, hasn't done anything over the last 2 weeks either. So fair amount of blame to be put on the offensive line, which has been really, really bad, especially the last couple of weeks. But I think the hard thing is he's been pretty consistently at 3 yards a carry. It's not like he's had like 3 5-yard a carry games and it's one bad 1 yard per carry game that's really dragging everything down, right? It's 38 carries for 118 yards, no touchdowns, which I think is the other hard part to digest. But like, he runs plenty hard. He runs harder than Kimani Vidal. So as far as in the tackles go, I don't think that makes as much of a difference. He can fall forward as good as anyone. I think with Kimani Vidal, and I'm not going to blame the vision either, just because it's like, I'm not seeing obvious holes that he's not running through. It's just when he's getting there, he doesn't have the same force or the same just ability to burst through the hole that we've seen him in years past. You know who does have burst? Kimani Vidal does, right? He has plenty of burst.
He's got some juice.
He also can create a little bit. And I think when your offensive line is really struggling like this, you need someone that can kind of make it work on their own. Rushing yards over expectation. He has to actually find something that might not be there, right? And because there hasn't been a lot there. With Gus Edwards, if it's not there, it's not going to be there, because he's the only player with 20 carries in the league that only has 1 missed tackle forced or less. He's not breaking any tackles. No. Out of 53 eligible backs, he's 47th in yards after contact. And the Chargers are letting contact happen pretty early. So you need someone who's going to be able to create that and make some people miss some tackles. And I think Kimani Vidal brings that. So let's get to this next part here with "You Got Me Ducked Up," which I autocorrected into something else when I sent it to David earlier. But he says, "I still believe this offense will come together and be all right. Players coming back healthy and utilizing Ladd McConkey more. Do you all still believe in the offense?" I'm guessing. David, I know there's been a lot of criticism of the offense. Do you believe they get it turned around?
I do. I do feel like there are some elements there that they need to just accentuate. Obviously, this is predicated on Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater coming back and providing more protection for Justin Herbert. And also, I feel like they need to let Justin cook a little bit more. I mean, through the first few games, his passing yards, passing attempts are all way down. And I understand, they want to run the ball, but if you can't run the ball, then you need to throw the ball. And you have an all-world quarterback that has the ability to really stretch the field. So I do feel like they'll get it figured out. They have some really smart coaches on that side of the ball. They have Jim Harbaugh, who has a track record of really being able to get the most out of his quarterbacks. He hasn't had a quarterback the level of Justin Herbert. So I feel like they need to get that production dialed in. They got to run the ball a little bit more, but I feel like they need to let Justin cook a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen the best version of this offense yet, and I think it is going to be better than what we've seen, but I also don't think it's going to get to the heights that some people think it is going to, and that's just kind of the reality that's come to me through 4 weeks. So we'll see. I do think they can give Justin Herbert more chances on first down to help himself out and not be so committed to we're just going to bang the ball in between the tackles on first down, right? Switch things up a little bit. At least if the run's not working, which it just hasn't the last couple of weeks. So I think the best is yet to come. I think a more mobile Justin Herbert and getting the tackles back helps. But I think it's hard to imagine this becoming a running gun offense all of a sudden, and it's going to be a high flying thing that fully feels like it's maximizing what Justin Herbert can do. I just don't see it right now. But let's get to this last one here from Bedhead Ted, who says, "Why are some fans upset at 2-2? Considering losing the offensive weapons, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, and being in rebuild mode for offense and having a top 5 defense so far, all things considered, don't we have a lot to be excited for?" David, I think this is the Twitter question version of who has it better than us, which, there's a fair amount of teams that have had it better than the Chargers so far. But what do you think here as far as maybe the expectations we should have compared to what we've seen so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think just expectations-wise, coming into the season, you expected to see a lot of success when you have Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert paired together, right? And I do feel like there are some legitimate reasons for optimism. I think you've seen that they, when they're going well, they can run the ball at a very, very high level when everything is moving and everybody's healthy. The defense has been great. I mean, like way better than any of us ever expected. So that's definitely a reason to be excited. But also I feel like there is some reasons to be, pessimistic as well. I mean, Justin Herbert's had his lowest passing yards output of his career through 4 games. The interior of the offensive line has been really bad. They've gone on way too many droughts offensively where they've just had, 6, 7, 8 drives of nothingness. And that, those things have to get corrected if they want to be able to hit their potential. But there's a lot of moving parts. This is a completely new regime. A lot of things that they're still learning, still trying to establish. So yeah, I think there's reasons to be optimistic and be happy, but also there are some things that absolutely have to get corrected during this bye week if they want to go on a run afterwards.
What? Yeah, I mean, I think that there are reasons you should be okay with being 2-2. I mean, especially with the offensive struggles that you've seen from this team. Like you said, I mean, there's 3 different games where they've had at least a 4-drive stretch where they get 1 first down or less between the 4 drives. So the offensive struggles are real, and it's hard to see it getting much better with the interior of the offensive line. But at the same time, you should be ecstatic about the Chargers defense. It's better than anyone could have expected through 4 weeks, and is going to keep you in every game. So like I said, it's been 4 weeks. The best is yet to come probably for this Chargers offense, and I do think they get back in line a little bit. But I think we're also seeing how hard it is to fully kind of overhaul an entire roster and think everything's going to come together perfectly. I think so far with the guys they've had, all of the moving pieces, which is they've had to, replace more starters probably than anyone, maybe not named like the Panthers or someone, but like it's difficult. This is maybe a multi-year process, right? That isn't going to show itself all in year 1, but it doesn't mean there's any reason to be upset about being 2-2 at this point. They can go on a run. They could give you plenty of reason to be upset about it, but they could also, right, do something fun, like be a playoff contending team. I don't think any of that is out of the window yet. So I think we do have to give it some time. There are reasons to be optimistic, but there's a lot of things that have to get fixed as well. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow because it is your team every day. But to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as following us on all of our social media. You can hit us up on, like everyone did today, on Twitter at Locked On LAC. You can hit us up on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David at Dro Talk SD, or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 and give us your 30-second Chargers voicemail, whether it's a question or a buy or sell, and we will get it on the show. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.